like the chairman said, I've got some Democrats that do good stuff, I got some Democrats that do some dumb stuff, and I got Republicans that do some great stuff, Republicans that do some dumb stuff. It is not just resigned, like you said, to any one political party anymore. What becomes frustrating is when the partisanship and the parties get in the way of good legislation. We had done one recently about, I had tried to, again, it was a mandate, maybe you don't like that, but mandate that a certain percentage of state contracts go to veterans, specifically disabled veterans who own businesses in the state, because it wasn't happening. And I did the amendment 6 times, it was voted down all 6 times, because it was somebody of my political persuasion who was offering it. And so, again, sometimes that partisanship gets in the way of good policy. When, for all intents and purposes, some of the best relationships that I have in Lansing are on the other side of the aisle, because the first thing that we did was sit down, establish the boundaries. You don't want to talk about this? I don't want to talk about that. Great, we disagree on 90% of the things. What's the 10% that we agree on? And let's bust our ass to get it done.
Why don't you talk about what the citizens want? Why are you guys like bugging up the citizens? I mean, again, do you ever think what?
Not what he means.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Well, I mean, explain the question, I can respond to it.
No, okay, I guess I'll wait, because I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, not at all. I just wanted to show you an example, and I found some bills in your voting record that I thought were bills that I would have opposed for reasons that are consistent with what we believe. And I found some bills that I thought you voted correct on. And I wanted to show you folks that on all sides you can find this common ground. So some of these votes, and this is just from this year. Senate Bill 111 and 242 were what you spoke to or alluded to recently in your beginning speech. But this again is an example of, to me, cronyism carve-outs by government, picking and choosing winners and losers. You can call it priming the pump, so to speak. We put out some money, we'll get some money back. Right now, that good jobs bill, or the Foxconn job bill, as I call it, landed up in Wisconsin. Taxpayers paid $1 million per job. That's what they paid to get Foxconn to come and build that factory over there. This is not the role of government, okay? And I don't care and this happened to come from Republicans, all right? But I wanted to also show you further down, and I'll let you have an opportunity to talk about this stuff.
Sure.
The sale of the Farnham building. Now, look at when they went to the new Capitol View building. I don't think you were in office at the time.
I voted against it.
You voted against it. All right, but it was a voice vote. And this is another complaint I have about our legislature, is the manner in which they do these votes, because a lot of these voice votes you won't be able to see, and you won't be able to hold these guys accountable. But this is another example. There's that bill is going to cost us $134 million over the next 30 years, but they're looking to get the sale from this to go back into the general fund. And I'm saying, look, this is taxpayers' money. Give it back to them. Okay? I don't know how you do it, but certainly, going back to the general fund to get, as legislators will say, reinvesting. Reinvesting is just another word for government taking from you and spending it. That's all it is. When you can do it much more efficiently. Licensing. I found one bill, but I can go through a bunch of them. Licensing is government saying that which you have a right to do, you ask us permission for and pay us money for, and we'll allow you to do it. And if you're a carpenter or a plumber or a technician of some sort, you've gone to school, you've done your training, and you come out and the state says, whoa, wait a minute, you haven't got permission from the Crown yet, and you haven't paid your tribute. And that's what licensing really is, isn't it? And so that was one bill that I found that all of them, look at 37-0, even Republicans voted for this. This I thought was interesting, and my question is why 6 years? Why not stop at 10 or 12 years? I actually agree with you on this vote. You actually voted yes, and I think that's great. I don't think they should be out there every 2 years, every 3 years, every 4 years. Because, like for example, my father owns a building, and it's a multi-unit building, and he's getting raked over the coals by Wayne, the city of Wayne's government, because they're looking for more and more revenue. So this was actually a pretty good bill, but I don't know why you guys stopped at 6 years. The omnibus education bill you voted no on. That seemed to be a controversial one, but again, it depends on how you look at this. How do you look at federal government putting? I don't think the federal government should be involved in education at all. That should be a local issue, at the best, at worst, a state issue.
Yes.
And like I said, I'll give you a chance to talk about any of these that you want. Now this was the worst one, and I got to tell you, folks, we've talked about this. I've talked about this till I've been blue in the face. This Senate Bill 97 represents some of the worst legislation out there because of the fact that tucked in this bill, which a lot of you guys missed, is that in the state of Michigan right now, the P3 legislations, there's two that are currently lawful in Michigan, one is currently not lawful. Design and design build are lawful. Design build finance is not yet lawful, but if this passes, it sets the precedence to allow it to be. Why is that important? Because these unelected bureaucrats would have the ability to impose user fees on you. A user fee is just a tax by another name.
Thank you.
Taxation is reserved for these folks, not for unelected bureaucrats that you cannot remove and you have no public input on to determine how the taxes get raised, when they raise them, the frequency by which they increase them, and no oversight whatsoever by that bill. And Kowal has now done this 3 times. And each time he tries to tighten it up a little bit more, but the bottom line is still the same. They're transferring their responsibility from themselves to unelected bureaucrats to tax you. That is some of the worst legislation that you can possibly support. And a lot of these guys missed it because the language is very creative in there. Let me go into some of these other ones because there were some good ones. He voted no on the gas tax.
Good ones, yeah.
So, okay, Republicans, you couldn't get any of your Republicans. After you folks voted 80% no on a special election that cost you $10 million, which we supposedly didn't have, okay, they went ahead and turned around and passed this anyway. Dave voted no, so thank you for that. On some of the amendments, this one was interesting, and this goes back to your veterans issue. And I'm not exactly sure what went on here because you introduced an amendment to have 5% of the money spent on state contracts to go to disabled veterans, and it obviously got voted no, but then you went 5 more times with additional amendments. 5%, 1%, 0.5%, 0.25%, and 0.1%, all of them failed. All right, now, again, Republican majority, how do you look at government's role to do this? Do you think this is their role or not? I'm not gonna judge this vote, I just caught that when I researched this, and I laughed when I got down to the other 5 amendments, because you must have been busy.
There's a video of it on Facebook. You check it
Yeah.
out.
Let's see, Department of Health and Human Resources, this has to do with the Refugee Assistance Program, you voted yes on this one. This is $1 million from state tax money, well, I shouldn't say state tax, this is your money, to go to assisting quote-unquote refugees. And if you've heard the stories about some of these folks, they're not refugees. By and large, these are just illegal immigrants, okay? You can look at the issue however you want. This is troubling me. So, another one, introduced, increased on the earned income tax credit. My only issue with this is that you go from 6% to 20%, but this is just for low-income workers. Why are we just targeting low-income workers? Why don't each of us get the same benefit of an earned income tax credit?
I venture to say, not to cut you off, that most people would qualify for the EITC increase. When Governor Snyder came into office, the EITC in Michigan used to be 20% of what the federal level was. It was reduced to 6%. And I'll simply add, it was President Reagan who called the EITC the best anti-poverty tool in the history of the United States. Because again, it only rewards individuals who are working,
Right.
not individuals who are simply obtaining benefits without doing work. It rewards individuals who are working and making low wages.
This is the last one. I would just qualify this as WTF. I don't get it. Mandating a 5-foot clearance when passing a budget.
Attention library patrons.
Voted yes on this
We
one.
will be closing in 30 minutes.
Yeah, what I'm trying to
Need a ride?
understand is,
Please
who
pick up
enforces
librarian
this?
call for a
Are
ride home.
officers carrying yardsticks?
We will be closing the doors promptly
I
at 9
guess the
p.m.
point of this
Thank
is
you.
that when does personal responsibility come back into play?
Yeah.
Shouldn't the driver be responsible enough to know that, you know what, this is a safe distance, this is not. You know, how about a bicyclist that knows that I shouldn't be out in this type of traffic today, I should be over there.
So the law actually states bicyclists are supposed to be in the road. The law says they are not supposed to be on sidewalks.
Right.
And so bicyclists are supposed to be in the road. This was a bill that I wrote with Senator O'Brien from Kalamazoo it was in response to the 50% increase that we saw in deaths from individuals who were being struck by cars or riding their bikes on the side of the road. Now, to your point, enforcement becomes difficult because X, Y, and Z. But the thought behind it was, again, how can we build in the training into the driver's training program about what the width and what the distance should be, and hope that people use that as their opportunity to, maybe just give us a little bit more in South Texas.
Thank you. Quick questions, quick answers. Where do you stand on the repeal of Common Core?
I sat on the subcommittee that was chaired by Representative Tim Kelly to decide that Michigan would adopt Common Core, so I'd be opposed to the repeal.
Okay, and then where do you stand on constitutional carry, quote unquote constitutional
Yeah,
carry?
yeah,
I don't
so-
think this current bill truly is constitutional carry, but go ahead.
So, and again, I'm not trying to give a long explanation to be like a BS politician, but there's nuance to these things. If somebody wanted to talk about bringing parity between the licensing process or a lack of a licensing process for concealed carry and open carry, I think that that is a worthwhile conversation to have. What I'm opposed to in the legislation as written is two things. The first being the removal of the training requirements, and the second is the removal of the notification for law enforcement. And so the notification for law enforcement piece is just concerning to me again. If I'm concealed carrying a weapon, I'm coming in interaction with a law enforcement official. As it's stated in the law today, you have to notify the law enforcement official that you're concealed carrying a weapon. This would remove that requirement, and so it gives me a little heartburn, and gives the law enforcement community heartburn as well. And when it comes to the training piece, I feel very passionate about this. Again, having served in a Scout Sniper platoon, having gone through thousands of hours of training, sending thousands of pieces of lead down range, I believe that owning that weapon, carrying that weapon, comes with the responsibility of knowing what you're doing, comes with the responsibility of knowing how to handle a gun, knowing what it means when I'm concealed carrying it, when you're looking at it, when it's out of the holster at the ground, when it's at the tactical alert or ready, and knowing what that can add to an escalation of force. And so on those two issues, as it's written today, I'm opposed to it.
And Medicaid expansion in Michigan, was it a success or failure?
So it depends on the criteria that you look at. If you look at Medicaid expansion from an increased access criteria, I would call it a success. If you look at Medicaid expansion from a lowering premiums perspective, I would say that there's still a whole lot more work to be done. When we passed Medicaid expansion in Michigan, it was estimated that 400,000 people would sign up for Medicaid and would have access to that benefit that didn't have it previously already. The thought being getting them access to a primary care physician would take individuals out of using the emergency room as their first line in that healthcare run. As it stands today, we've had 650,000 people that have signed up for Medicaid. So from an increasing access perspective, I think it was incredibly successful. But from an affordability perspective, and this cuts across all of healthcare, healthcare costs continue to rise. And until we want to talk about that, I think in a sincere and bipartisan way about how we can lower those premiums, we're going to continue to have the problems that we have today.
So do you consider forcing people to sign up as part of the success as by giving them access to it, by forcing them into it?
Who was forced to sign up for Medicaid?
You by law are mandated to have health insurance.
You're not by law mandated to purchase Medicaid.
If you can't afford anything else.
If you can't afford anything else, you are. It is a consumer product that you have to have.
Mhm.
And so do you consider that as part of the success, is by forcing people to do it?
Well, again, I think part of the success was increasing coverage.
Okay.
And-
Again, it's one of those things you gotta sit down and come together and get together on it.
Sure.
And I want you to know, I appreciate you coming here tonight.
Thank
Well, I
you.
appreciate all
It's
He's my favorite conservative Democrat.
Don't say that, you're on the street there.
I think you're a closet Republican.
Yeah, please don't say that, I'm up for election next year.
Senate, and I forget the gentleman's name that answers the questions when you call about any Senate issue.
The Secretary of State?
Secretary of Senate. I spoke to him about a month ago, and he pretty much told me, I thought it was kind of sad but humorous, that pretty much with the exception of the 5-day possession rule, all other rules are subject to getting around. And that was his word, depending on who's in leadership, and it comes from both parties. What sticks at my craw is the fact that on amendments, there is no required roll call vote. They're all voice votes. I have no idea, and no way of holding, okay, so if you could clarify that, because that was what I got from him.
So the difference lies between the House and the Senate.
Okay.
And so to your point, and again, I'm not trying to be attacking, just a matter of fact. In the House and in the Senate, everybody reports to and works for, per the rules, the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader. My staff, I have 3 staffers, they don't technically work for me, they work for Arlen Meekoff, the Majority Leader. And so he has ultimate control over what happens to my staff and vice versa. And when it comes to the rules of the Senate and the House, who sets those rules, those are all set by the majority party. One of the rules that I take umbrage with, and it's not up here, and it wouldn't be because they don't like to advertise it. As a member of the Senate, I receive $50,000 a year to run my office, paying the rent, magazine subscriptions, newspaper subscriptions, the correspondence that I have go back and forth with my constituents. I'm given $127,000 to pay 3 staffers, and I'm given 2 healthcare packages to give to those 3 staffers. I serve 270,000 people in southeastern Michigan. If I was a member of the majority, I would receive that same $50,000 for managing the office, but I would receive north of $190,000 to pay 4 staffers and receive 4 healthcare packages. My challenge there, and again, I'm not trying to poke, I'm just saying it's frustrating because we all represent the same number of people. We're all responsible to the same number of people, we're getting significantly less resources to do it. And so to your point about getting around and doing the readings and doing the voice vote, if I was in the House of Representatives and I wanted to do an amendment, Representative Bill Curry does a bill, think about it, and I want to go up and I want to do an amendment to it, and so I get recognized by who's in the chair, the Speaker of the House or the Speaker Pro Tem. They don't have to recognize me if they don't want to. That means I don't get to give my amendment if they decide that they don't want me to give my amendment, which in my opinion is an infringement on my constitutional rights. Thank you, Susie. And so that's in the House. You don't have to. If you get up and are able to give your amendment, the individual in the chair will say the question before the House is on the adoption of the Kinesic Amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. The amendment is not adopted. In that period of time, he apparently has counted over 70 votes and determined that there's not enough support for that amendment. Again, an infringement on what I think is our constitutional rights as elected officials. It is done simply to control the messaging and the legislation and to ensure that certain things aren't added and certain amendments aren't adopted.
The
Again,
Constitution, though, does this apply to the Senate as well, but in the House, it speaks of if 1/5 of the chamber objects to procedure,
right.
they can form a formal protest. But, however, in the Constitution, it doesn't specify how they'll be recognized.
Correct.
And it doesn't specify how they'll be counted. And because of that,
Correct.
they're required to stand up every morning during the reading of the rules and propose how this would be done, and then they have to vote on that. And he's right, the majority leader just ignores it, because they don't want to go through the hassle. I don't know, does that go on in the Senate?
It does not go in the Senate. And so that's one of the things I like about being in the Senate so much, and why you'll see situations where I'll offer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different amendments on things. And I'll give you 2 more examples. I'll talk about the veterans one. In the Senate, we have at our desk, the red button for no, I press it a lot, the green button for yes, the white button for speak. If I press the speak button, my name pops up on the board, it says Kinesic. I am required by the Senate rules to be recognized by the Speaker or the Senate Majority Leader or the President of the Senate to get up to the podium and speak. I can get up to the podium and speak. I can offer my amendment. And they will say the question before the chamber is on the adoption of the Kinesic Amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say nay. The board will open up so we can vote. Before that board is closed, and this is really in the weeds, so I apologize, a Democrat, if we're offering the amendment, would say record roll call vote. At that moment, they close the
Attention
board,
library patrons.
and then we have to vote
We'll be
on
closing
whether
in
or not
20
we want to
minutes.
have a recorded vote.
Please save any work
Which
you're
takes-
doing and bring any materials you wish to check out to the circulation
So
desk.
we have 11 Democrats, so it's enough for us to
We will be shutting
require
down the computers in
a
10
recorded
minutes.
vote, and so they'll close
Thank
the
you.
board, they'll open it back up on voting for whether or not we want to have a recorded vote. That will pass because we have the minimum number of votes, and then the amendment will come up for a record roll call vote. So in the Senate, we have more leeway, the rules are more on our side. And so what happens at that point, and what I was trying to do with the amendment on the veterans contracts, was to say, we have in the state law right now a goal of giving veterans access to state contracts. A goal is as good as saying the word may, which is very different from saying the word shall in state law. And so the goal of 5% is actually less than 0.5% of contracts that are awarded to veterans. And so when I got up and I gave my amendment asking for a required 5%, didn't want it to pass because it would be a good sort of feather in my cap, if you will. And we don't want to give Kniezek that feather in his cap. And so we'll vote it down, 20 to 18, with all members of the Senate present. So I'll get up and I'll say, all right, you don't want 5%? That's fine, give me 3%. And so now they'll shift the individuals who voted yes and the individuals who voted no, so that by the end of the day, everybody will have at least once voted in favor of what that was. I like to do these things, and again, not to be combative, but to try and hold my conservative colleagues accountable for the things that they propose to support and tell all of you that they support, but then come to Lansing and do the exact opposite. And so one of the things I had done this recently with was on a piece of legislation proposed by Senator Colbeck from Canton. He wanted to mandate the teaching of certain amendments of the Constitution to students. Now, it says in state law today, the Constitution has to be taught. It doesn't say what parts of it have to be taught. And so he was concerned that certain parts were being ignored and being left out. And so he wanted legislation that would mandate the teaching of certain amendments to the Constitution. I was frustrated by the fact that certain amendments were not included as being important enough to be taught to students. The Fourth Amendment, which I had to remind him is one of his key issues, and is under attack from the federal level of government on an almost daily basis. Illegal searches, you take your pick. The 13th Amendment and a whole bunch of other ones. So I got up and I offered an amendment to say, I would like to require, instead of the teaching of some amendments of the Constitution, I want to require the teaching of the entire Constitution. Don't clap, because it was voted down. So it was voted down. And so again, sometimes it's frustrating, and what I hear from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they'll say, sometimes that Kniezek pisses us off, but we think he's principled, and he'll go shoot guns with us afterwards, so he's okay, I guess. So that was another reason.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.